Good afternoon and welcome to the Trust Fundraising Hub live with me, Beth Upton. I am live now across Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, answering any and all of your questions about trust fundraising. You can write your comments below the video wherever you see it. I will be, if I look like I'm looking over there, it's because I'm looking on my other screen to double check for comments that come through before they come through on my streaming program. Otherwise, I've got some questions that have been sent in advance and I will cover those now. I am live every month across these channels and it's always on the third Thursday of the month. And it's always at 12:15. So just to put the date in your diary for the next month, I will be live on Thursday, the 21st of April at 12:15. And as I say, that is on Twitter. And the Twitter handle is @TrustFundraise, or on Facebook. And the Facebook group is the Trust Fundraising Hub. And you do have to be a member of the group to be able to access the live on Facebook. And also on LinkedIn. We do have a Trust Fundraising Hub group on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I can't stream on that. So this is streamed on the Money Tree fundraising page on LinkedIn. So far, so good. I'm going to dive into some questions that I've been sent in advance. And the first one is around advice on the documents and systems that are needed for an organisation to be ready to apply for funding. And I want to say this is a really sensible question, not one that everyone asks. So I really appreciate the forward planning and thought that goes into that. And I'm going to kind of rattle off a list. So obviously you need your governing documents. You need a recent annual report, you need your accounts. If you're registered with the Charity Commission, you need to make sure that all of that is up to date and beyond reproach. You need ideally 2 years finances. That would be really helpful. An organisational strategy or business plan, something that's wider than just income generation. Obviously within that, an income generation or a fundraising plan and a fundraising strategy. You need your annual budget. So that's for things that are projects as well as things that are ongoing as well. So, and within that, I would say it's really useful somewhere within your organisational budgeting process, particularly given that trust fundraising looks predominantly at restricted funds for projects, to have done a piece of work, and you can do this alongside your finance team, of allocating your centralised costs across your projects in an equitable manner. Now, that is deliberately vague. You can't just arbitrarily put them equally across all projects. Some projects will be bigger, some projects will be smaller, some will be long term, some will be short term. So whatever is equitable, and doing that piece of work and keeping your working out, I think is what I'm trying to say, really. Excuse me. It's really important, because someday someone will ask you how you worked out that is the contribution to your call for your projects. So that's a really useful exercise to have done up front, I would say, within your budgeting. It's always good to have a bit of a biog and thing about your trustees and your CEO, like a CV and stuff. Different trustees will be useful for different applications. It might be that somewhere in their past they've done something that's super relevant to one of your projects, and it's always good to have those, to have a little snappy biography that you can submit into an application where it's appropriate. And alongside that, references. They're not as common as they used to be in trust fundraising applications, but it can be useful. I used to find them very useful in terms of medical research, to have references from people who are known in the medical research world, so that when you're applying for funding, your referee can tell the funder that this is a decent project and it's a good way to do research and it's a good way to spend their money, that sort of thing. That's all really useful. You might want to kind of have biographies and things of your senior management team, any committee members, patrons, all of that kind of stuff. It depends how much detail you want to go into, but having a little something, having an ability to know who your key people are and where they come from, their background, knowing can help you know who to draw in for which application, or it can go into an application. You need all your policies sorted. So depending on what's relevant for you, you need a reserves policy. If you aren't at your reserves level, you need to have a statement agreed by the trustees as to how they're going to spend it down or how they're going to raise it up, depending on which side of not at your reserves you're at. You need, gift acceptance policies. You might need equality and diversity policies. You might need vulnerable people's policies. You might need child protection policies, environmental policies. You need your privacy policy, obviously. All of that stuff. You need to think about the policies that are relevant to your work and make sure that you have policies and that those policies are regularly reviewed and that happens at a trustee level and that they are actively reviewed and signed off, and that all of those trustee minutes are there should anyone need to see them. And then it's what will help you to do your job as well, that might go kind of beyond what you've talked about in the question in terms of documents and systems, is having your need clearly articulated. Have you done a really good needs analysis? Has the organisation, I mean by that, done a really good needs analysis? How do you measure the impact you're making? How do you measure the change that's being made in your programmes? Having all those monitoring and evaluation tools set out in advance so everybody knows where the start point is, where the ideal endpoint is, what your plan is to get there, and how you're going to measure your progress towards those points, all of those things. And then in terms of systems for managing grants, obviously a database would be great, but to be very honest, you can manage a grant program on an Excel spreadsheet. You have to be good at Excel. You have to make sure that everyone has good Excel etiquette in terms of using the same spreadsheet in the same way. And that's why a database can be easier. Although, to be honest, you need database etiquette in the same way. So whatever works for you in terms of management, but the management can be quite straightforward. It can be just Excel and then a calendar that prompts you for when to do reporting and things. It doesn't need to be over and above. And I hope that quite long list is helpful. So I'm just going to double check across the channels. Not seeing anything yet. So on to the next question. So like I say, feel free to jot your comments down and I'll include your questions in our session if at all I can. If you've missed this and you have a question, then do pose a question and we will include it in next time's session. So what are people's thoughts on mixing trusts and major donors into one single homogenous philanthropy team or keeping them separate? And I'm sure that there are arguments on both sides of this. And I will start by saying I don't think there is a one size fits all in anything, particularly in this. What I will say is that trust fundraising is predominantly about excellent writing alongside relationships. But if we think about the vast majority of trusts, if you think about your portfolio, there will be some with whom having a relationship is possible. Of those, some who will want a relationship with you. So it's a smaller part of the work and the written word is always going to be paramount. Whereas with major donors, it is always about relationships, of which some people will want written work. So that's what I would say. So personally, I think they are very different disciplines and do well in a larger team, but kept separately. So there's a trust team and a major donor team and maybe even a corporate team within your philanthropy team. But I don't think that you have the one person who is necessarily excellent at writing and excellent at relationships. I think if you're looking for one person to do both, you're going to make it really hard to recruit for yourself. Recruitment is hard enough. I know lots of excellent trust fundraisers who don't feel comfortable doing public relationship stuff because they are very happy to be sort of behind the scenes written people. And I know some excellent major donor fundraisers who aren't that brilliant at writing, who say, I've got one person I know who says, oh, I can't write a case for support. Writing isn't really my thing. I'll do the relationships and I need to team up with someone who can do excellent writing. And I think if you can identify where your strengths lie and you can apply for jobs that feed into your strengths, then everybody is a winner and everyone is happier. So that's my personal opinion. But I do know fundraising teams where they are mixed as well. So I think it depends on lots of factors. And when we see fundraising teams where things are either separate or things are mixed, we don't always understand why those decisions have been made in those ways either. So I think it's hard to know what the rationale is, and it's easy to make assumptions that their structure fits with our rationale, and therefore it must be the same thing. Last month I did a bit of a chat about inflation and including inflation in project applications. I think I even mentioned the idea that inflation has risen so sharply in the short term that it wouldn't be outside the realms of possibility for us to go back to some existing funders and talk about how the project is going to cost even more because of unexpected inflation at the current time compared to when we wrote our project budgets. Now, obviously, one of the biggest, certainly most public of those inflation items at the moment is energy bills, which are about to skyrocket. And should we talk to our funders about that? And I think the short answer is yes, we absolutely should. We should always be upfront and honest about the true costs of delivering our work. Now, if you have already submitted your budget, say you did this last year before they talked about where the energy cap change was going to happen, before there was a war in Ukraine, before oil prices went sky high, before petrol prices went sky high, then I think it is perfectly okay to go back to your potential funders and talk to them about that. They can only say no. You can't make them give you more, but you can explain to them the project is going to cost more. When they say no, they will want to know what your plan is to solve that problem. So you do need a plan, but it's very unlikely that your funder is the sole funder of a project. It's very likely that you've been going to more than one funder. And I think you just got to crack on and keep fundraising. You've got to start supplementing things with unrestricted reserves, and you can talk about the impact that will have elsewhere in the organisation, and all of those sorts of things. So I think you can have those conversations. You don't have to have an easy answer as to where the money's going to come from if they say no. You can say we're going to have to cut the project. If we don't have enough to run the whole project and we've only got 80% now, then we have to cut 20% of the project. And I think you can be blunt as long as you are being honest. So there are some difficult conversations I would say organisations should be having internally about what if we don't get any extra money in. I definitely think in terms of ongoing projects, you should be talking about inflation more than perhaps I've witnessed people do in the last few years. You should be really upfront and say, these are the costs today. So obviously inflation has already happened for some things, like the price of fuel has already gone up, so it is already inflated. So if we were doing a budget based on petrol costs today, we'd base them on petrol costs today, and the chances are that they're going to continue to rise over the next 12 months. So if we then don't get the money in for 12 months, petrol will be that much more expensive in 12 months. So we should already be including for inflation in all of our project budgets. So based on today's costs, asterisks, allowance for inflation as project doesn't start for another 12 months. And you can Google current inflation rates to see what you should be using as and again, going back to my previous comment around allocating your central costs out to your projects and having a justifiable number, I think as long as your number is justifiable, you can within reason put what you want in there, because it will depend on what your project costs are as to how much your inflation is. So if it's a lot of salary, you can control that. I would argue you should always give people a pay rise, because otherwise you're basically giving them a pay cut, but you don't have to. So it's things like that. So we should definitely be including it in project budgets, and we should be being quite upfront about it. So I've had a question. Oh, hold on, let me just check what's going on. I have had a question about small trusts who don't have application forms but have given you a gift. What's the best way to report back and make another ask when there's no formal process? I do apologise, I've got a real frog in my throat this morning. Or in fact, this afternoon. So the best way, the question was the best way. So I'm going to talk about the best way, and then I'm going to talk about the practical alternatives, because the best way is not always practical. The best way is to ask them. So you've had a gift, you've obviously sent your thank you letter, and you may or may not have done this within your thank you letter. But it would be good to say in your thank you letter, we'd love to keep you informed and as to our progress, and we plan to. So when you write your thank you letter within a week of getting the gift, laying it out, this is absolute best practice. So thank you so much for your grant of £2,000 towards our education project. We're really grateful for that, blah, blah, blah. you haven't specified how you would like to be kept informed about the progress we make on this project. We plan to update you 12 months from now, or 12 months after the project starts, or 6 months into the project, or find a date, and let you know how we're getting on. If you would prefer something else, I would be really happy to accommodate what works for you. Please let me know. Here's my direct email address. Here's my direct phone number. So that's the absolute best thing, is to have done it at the thank you letter stage, because then you're telling someone what they can expect, and you're offering them a chance to change that. And then they will hopefully email or pick up the phone, and then you're in a conversation. You've started a relationship. So you did that or you didn't do that, and they didn't reply, even if you did it. And so you reach your 6-month mark or your 1-year mark or whatever it is. You should just send them an update without an ask, if I'm really honest. The next time they hear from you shouldn't be to ask for more money if they haven't heard what difference their current gift made. So if you want to be asking on an annual basis, your reports shouldn't be at the same time. So I would say ask, 6 months later report, 6 months later ask would be a better structure. Obviously, it depends on the timings for your projects and having something good to say. And I would also say, if something momentous happens outside of your stated structure, so if you've told them you will update them after 12 months and 9 months in something big happens, you hit a goal early, you have a brilliant case study, then write and say, I told you I wasn't going to write to you for 12 months, but I didn't want you to miss out on this amazing news. Thanks to you, this super cool thing has happened. So adding those personalized communication points in, as well as your kind of planned ones, is really important. But you still then do your planned one as well. So as promised, here is the report on a 12-month progress thanks to your grant. That's what you do. And then the ask is separate. So there may not be any formal process, but annual is fairly expected. You know, most of us work on an annualized basis thanks to the calendar. And so I think, you know, as long as you've said thank you and you've reported on progress before you've made an ask, then that's absolutely fine. If you haven't done the how often do you want to be communicated with at the thank you, you could do that at this first reporting stage. It has now been 12 months since your generous grant. I want to write to you and tell you, wanted to share with you the difference your grant has made. You didn't let us, you know, don't say you didn't let us know. That's not a very nice thing, but they didn't let us, you know. So, you know, I'm assuming this suits you. If you would like a different communication frequency, if you'd like to be updated more frequently in future, or you want to hear from us more or less, then please do let me know, and I will happily work to whatever works best for you. Something like that is a good second time to do that if you haven't done that at the thank you letter stage. And then, like I say, leave it a period of time, and give them an opportunity to come back to you. That's how long you need to leave it. So depending on whether you email or write or phone or whatever, and hopefully you will get a response from that. If you and then your ask is led by whatever that response is. So they might say, we don't want to hear from you ever again. This was a one-off gift, in which case you can't ask again. Or you could go back and go, gosh, that's a shame. I was about to submit another application. You know, does that mean I can't submit another application for the same work, or does that mean I can't submit it ever again? You know, maybe some clarity around that to try and push on that. Or they could say, do you know what, actually, really nice to hear from you. Thanks. We've got a trustee meeting in 3 weeks. I'll make sure this goes to trustees, at which point you go, gosh, would the trustee meeting in 3 weeks be too soon for me to submit another request, please? We've been so successful with what you've done for us so far. We'd love to maintain and grow that success together. Something like that. And try, if you can, the whole point is to try and start a dialogue where you're asking some questions to get some sense as to how often. Obviously, there will be ones that you never hear from, right? And they just write your check, and that's amazing. And it's frustrating because all of the professionals talk about a relationship way being the way forward. So it does feel annoying, but you know, also it's quite easy. So you've written your thank you, you've written your report, you haven't had any feedback from either of those things. I mean, what do you think is reasonable? Like, it depends. Do you know how often they meet as trustees? This, that, and the next thing. There's no point waiting until after you think their trustee meeting happens. So you want to get in on that time. But a period of time, maybe a month later, you write and say, following up from my report, we were really successful together. I would like to ask the trustees to consider a repeat donation of X to the same project to enable it to happen again, or having helped us set up this project, I wondered if the trustees would consider priming this next project so that we can make the same difference again. So I think it depends on what they say. You can glean a bit of information by looking at annual reports from trusts over a period of time. So if you go through, they all list their grantees at the back. Very few don't, and you can get a sense over time as to whether they're doing any repeat donations. And you just literally open up 2 or 3 across your screens and see if you can see any repeat donations over time. So that's a very long answer, which I hope is helpful for you. I think it was Elizabeth who wrote and asked me that question. There's, like I say, there's no really easy answer, unfortunately. But the answers we have are to try and listen and to try and react accordingly. And if not, just set yourself some arbitrary rules if you don't know. But my top tip for the future is the next time this happens, ask them about communications in that thank you letter. So say, I propose this. If that doesn't suit you, please let me know. I would happily do, what the trustees find most useful. So if you haven't been able to watch this live, then the video does stay up on the social channels for a little while, and then it naturally goes off. I assume that's to do with data storage at the social media companies. And what we do is we move them onto our YouTube channel. So you can search for Money Tree Fundraising on YouTube, and you can see all of our historical Q&As with me waffling on and answering all sorts of questions over the last, well, I think I've been doing this for more than a year now. So there's probably about 12 by now, because there are a couple of the months of the year where I don't do them. But if you want to look back and see any questions that you've missed, then please do go and check out our YouTube channel. Still no live questions. So I'm going to go into my final question that I've received, which is some advice on a strategy for raising trust money for niche causes. So it is tricky because there are, when you look at trusts as a whole and you either segment them by the number of trusts or you segment them by donation volume, there are skews that trusts do not give equally across all causes. So traditionally trusts give less to animal causes and they give a lot to healthcare. They might not give so much to education. They give a lot to medical things. There are only key trusts who support medical research, and that's a very niche thing. So then when you look at a very niche cause within perhaps the questioner doesn't say whether they're a popular or unpopular area in trust, it can feel like it's not a viable option. And it's certainly true that depending on your cause area and your size and how niche you are, trust will be more or less as part of your overall income portfolio. It won't necessarily always be the thing that wins the most gifts for all causes. So I would say start with your competitors. Who else has got a niche? Let's assume this is a health cause. Who else is helping people with a niche disorder or disease or something that has a similarly low volume of people who have it? And where are they getting their money from? Because they are bound to publish who their trust funding donors are on their annual report. Also, if you Google their name, you will come up eventually with any listings of their name on, say, Charity Commission reports and things like that. So some really good Googling skills using exclusions and inclusions can really help you there. So I would say that. And I would... and then a really good search on the Charity Commission website. So the Charity Commission website has an advanced search feature, and you can search for organisations that specify down to quite a level. You can use keyword searches Obviously, everyone on the Charity Commission is a charity, and that means those who receive grants as well as those who give them. So make sure you're using the search feature that excludes people who don't give away grants, and that can be really helpful. And if you have one funder, ask them. So if you are funded by one grant maker in your really, really, really niche cause and you're struggling to find any others, ask them, because they hang out together, trust funders, and I bet they know everyone else who's also funding this super rare disease or rare diseases like that, or whatever the thing is. That ask them, say, you know, we're really hoping to expand our portfolio of funders. We want to grow. We want to reduce our reliance on our core supporters like you. We really love you, but you know, you don't want us to be reliant on you any more than we want to be reliant on you. It's a risk. Who do you know out in the world who's also funding things like this? Who do you think we could go to and get support from? And those are the strategies I would use. So competitors, Charity Commission, ask your existing funders. So our half an hour is just about up. Sorry, I was probably started a couple of minutes late. So I want to say thank you very much for listening today. And again, if you've missed today and you want to ask me some questions, I am next live on Thursday, the 21st of April, 12:15, so just after noon. And I'm here at Trust Fundraise on Twitter, on the Trust Fundraising Hub on Facebook, and on the Money Tree Fundraising page on LinkedIn live. So either submit your questions in advance or ask me them live at the time and I will answer them. If you've submitted in advance and you can't access the live chat at the time, then know that they do stay live on the social channels for a little while, but afterwards they end up on our YouTube channel. So you can just go to YouTube and search for Money Tree Fundraising, and all of our historical videos of me chatting live about fundraising are available there. Otherwise, I will see you all next month. Bye bye.